Hello, my name is Robert Simoes. I am the founder of the Debate Network. And today, the topic is the land claims issue in British Columbia continues on with uncertainty due to the provincial and federal government's inability to acknowledge and preserve private property rights when negotiating with the First Nations of Canada. My affirmative argument is yes. Neither government has looked at the situation from the point, of the residents and private property owners' rights. In fact, I would question who the government represents in its decision making. For example, let's look at UNDRIP. UNDRIP, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which BC Premier David Eby adopted to follow in negotiations with First Nations. Give me a break. First, the UN needs to deal with wars going on, not Indigenous rights in countries like Canada. Second, with this, if you think Canadians should be basing their decisions or laws on a paper from an organization that literally does nothing, and out of 180 nations, only around 25 are full democracies, while 60 authoritarian regimes exist. If you think we should be following what these regimes state, you're smoking some really good BC bud. No. UNDRIP requires that we consult with First Nations about development. Yeah, no. Consults and agreements with First Nations is part of the reason why a pipeline with an initial budget of $7 billion ballooned to $35 billion. Following UNDRIP gives a minority control over the economics of the majority. And that is not acceptable. That the government of BC is ignoring the residents of BC and just, stupidly following UNDRIP. Sounds like a social disease to me, personally. Now, that's the BC government. They're following UNDRIP. What's the federal government doing? Well, the federal government, to undermine private property rights, has recently signed an agreement with the Musqueam Nation out here, acknowledging their ancestral rights and claims about the Lower Mainland of British Columbia. That includes Vancouver. Again, this whole thing is very ambiguous because in this statement, again, the federal government does not clearly define property and does not clearly define private property rights. Really, the feds are letting land policy and rights in this province be done in secret. That is what they've done. They met with the Musqueam in secret. Other First Nations didn't know what was going on. And this is what's going on, is nobody else is being consulted. Now, my solution to this is the following. The federal government or the provincial government, whenever they enter into negotiations on land title, land rights with First Nations, the first paragraph, the first line of all negotiations should be private property rights are not on the table. They are enshrined to those owners. You cannot infringe upon them. The federal government's not going to do it. But they don't do that. So they create all this uncertainty about private property rights. Now, I don't believe that ever the government is going to come and kick private property people off their land. And the reason being is, imagine mortgages. What would the banks do? Who's going to bail them out? Right? Who's going to pay for this? The First Nation's going to make the banks whole when they take over the property? Yeah, that dog don't hunt. No, it'll be the taxpayer if that was to happen. And quite honestly, it won't happen because it would be political suicide as to take private land away. Governments need to quit focusing on the wrongs of the past towards First Nations at the expense of the rest of Canada and right now, in particular, BC. So, If you think my argument is wrong, don't hide behind comments. Step into the debate. The Debate Network lets you challenge and debate real people live. Structured video debate, no interruptions, no chaos, just the exchange of ideas. Create your position, schedule a debate, and defend your argument. The Debate Network. Civil debate, real people. Have a great day.